scene. The light mode has now found, no doubt, a new amount of viewers who are very sad about how bright things are on the screen. But we're going to be getting into Griffin vs. Kingzone game number 1. Talk a bit about the LCK and where it ended up. If you notice, Kingzone overall, they were the third place finisher. They also, interestingly, lost the second least amount of games. They actually lost less games than SK Telecom T1 at 12 game losses. And like we mentioned, they ran the absolutely ran the super fast way through the second round robin. The speed run of the second round robin, or any round robin, of course, it's best of 3s, so 2 games is the minimum you play a set. You play 9 teams. 18 is the minimum amount of games. They played 19 in the second round robin. Now, one of those was a loss to SKT, but they actually beat every other team, only lost 2 games to SKT, 1 game amusingly to a Freak of Freaks in a 2-1 victory. Played 8 best of 2-game series, 1 3-game series. And because they beat Sandbox when they were kind of on the downward fall, in the middle of the season when they were working out their stuff, they beat Dumb1, but again, that's hard to equate. It was only their final match of the season when they beat Griffin when people were like, wait, they won a lot, and like really reliably, and their players play a lot of stuff, and that's the crazy thing, is how good Dumb1 looked in their 16-3 run, and Griffin looked in their 16-3 run, and working out what their ceiling is. Like, I'm so excited to see their best of 5. And their opponent today was Griffin, who, of course, as we mentioned, Kingzone were able to take out. I referenced this during the series, but the first time Kingzone faced Griffin was in week number 1 of the LCK. And this was after Kingzone had like nosedived at Kesper Cup, Rascal getting beaten in reverse matchups. And then they came out, and on the big stage against Griffin super smashed them. This was some Super Smash Bros. Stuff here. You'll notice 707, Xin Zhao, and Akali. The sum total of objectives in game number 1 for Kingzone was 4 kills. They got nothing else. And then game number 2, it was the same. It was Kingzone got 6 kills for a total of 10 in the series, 2 Drakes, but nothing else. No turrets in entire series for Kingzone against Griffin. Now, Kingzone had a lot of growing to do. Remember, they played 16 best of 3s between those 2 series, but this was very much, Rascal not being able to have an impact top lane, Cuz picking a riskier jungle champ and not being able to perform. And the big thought was that Rascal, Cuz, and Pawn would be the downfall of this team, because actually in game number 1 of this series, Defton Tucson got a first blood on Viper and Lands, really nice all-in from the support Gragas, and that was when we're like, oh man, Defton Tucson! But then everything just fell apart, and you can't just have one winning lane to do well. Seeing people talking about Akali abusing and things like that. You can have your little fun with your memes. We'll see how much of that is all true, but that was the reality. This series was not close at all. But where things changed for Kingzone is, look at the change from the time that they came back. So the 23rd to the 1st, you'll notice the SB versus Kingzone series into the Kingzone versus Humble Live series. That's when the second round robin and also the Lunar New Year break happened. They came back from the break and beat Humble Life, and they're like, okay, that might mean something, might not. They lost to SK Telecom, but in that spree, they then basically 2-0'd everyone except Afrika. And in that win streak, there was some things that actually did catch my eye. For example, let's look at Rascal's champion pool. Rascal, for the longest time, was 7-0 Urgot, and then everything else was around 50%, and he wasn't really performing on the picks, and he seemed like an Urgot one-trick when it came to champions that were working for him. So you look at the start of the season, and you see a big Urgot win streak after starting the season 0-4. Big Urgot win streak, he's abusing Flex Akali when there's there to be abused. More Urgot victories. But then remember the point I talk about. They come back after the week's break with the Humble Life series. So let's cut off the first part of the season in where the screen is orientated. So we go past the Urgot meta. Some people, when the Urgot meta went away, thrived. And were able to get things going. Think of Khan and how good he has been in the second round robin, with the Urgot meta largely an afterthought for him. And then some players struggled. Sword, for example, has been playing the Urgot out of meta and also just not being able to perform very well. But consider the run of champions here that begins with their Dumb One Gaming, with their Jin Air series. Like, even if you just start it from the screen, there's a lot of unique picks in a row that happen. He goes Vlad, Yorick, Camille, Lucian, Lissandra, Gangplank before he repeats the champion. All of them a victory. And this is a player that had Urgot only as win rates, right? So this is already the player showing that with Urgot versus Aatrox removed, he plays no Urgot Aatrox, only dropped 3 games in this 16-3 run. He can play the carries, which is stuff like the Vladimir, quite well. I think Kingzone have been one of the more willing teams to play AP Cannon, and I think AP Cannon has kind of replaced Urgot in a very different way in terms of strong laning and then reliable teamfight role, so it's good to see he can play that. He plays Ornn in this series, and that's the tank initiator that usually Sword has been tasked with. Like, this is not a perfect run of games, right? But this is also a player that had never been a starter for a team before this season. Player who sat behind players for a long time in 10-man rosters on Longzhu and into Kingzone. The only player that stuck around, the only sub that stuck around after 2017 Spring. But as I had mentioned at the start of the stream, a player that is rewarded for strong mental. Like, he's supposed to have a very good head on his shoulders, and that's why that when Khan needed to be subbed out for emergency and also potentially tilt or poor performance reasons, they were able to sub in largely a rookie, a player that had played less than 10 pro games into the top lane and perform. So Rascal was always a player I was very interested to track his development, and the kind of TLDR of this screen is, okay, can play a lot of stuff and isn't a one trick and can actually play multiple sides of matchups. So big shout out to Rascal and his development. I think another player that should be shouted out on the Kingzone side is Cuz, a player who was a Royal Rotor for Longzhu, then didn't really play for Kingzone outside of isolated games. He also had a pretty poor start to the season, like we're referencing. He tried a lot of stuff, but nothing was really working. The Jax was the only champion he was winning on. As you can see, quite a lot of Jax play. But let's, again, turn it at the turning point, which is towards the big run of victories they go on. And you'll notice that the picks from before evolve into the picks of now. And after the Aatrox only meta that he had going on, really good Gragas player. Like, I think his Gragas has been one of the best we've seen on stage next to like Score this season. And even if you look at stat lines in victories, he was never popping. Like, you see a lot of the stat lines here, and it's a lot of 229, a lot of I'm a good team player and getting a good early game start with some good ganks, and then it's kind of closing. But then look at some of the stat lines. Like, this is a player where if this is like a regular sport, right, like NFL, like soccer, AFL, like, this is definitely a player who was putting in very modest totals and then suddenly was just breaking records in yardage or in goals scored or just, it's in possessions in an AFL sense. This is a huge uptick in performance from the Dumb One series onwards. Like, multiple high kill games, playing champions like Gragas and Rek'Sai, who don't always pop in the early game. Probably our best Rek'Sai player. Like, what's his Rek'Sai KDA? Like, look at this. Holy crap. I didn't even notice this till now. Like, his Rek'Sai KDA is 14.3. His Gragas is 15.8. But you just look at the Rek'Sai games. 807, 315, 614, 413, 603, 612. Like, that's some badass Rek'Sai games going on there. This is a really, like, a player who's been in really strong form. And now suddenly you look at Rek'Sai and Gragas especially, and you consider banning those, because both as a team when it comes to, say, Gragas Yasuo and Teamfight Gragas, or purely as Rek'Sai is the bridge to the mid game, purely from how strong she is at one item. This has been some really impressive stuff from Cuz. So these two players who you were just ready as a Kingzone fan to be like, we're not going to win anything with Rascal and Cuz. Now you're like, Rascal and Cuz, like, I just hope they can put forward their form from regular season into playoffs. So that's so much more hype. This is a player who, after Tarzan, could realistically be talked about as a top 3 to 5 jungler. So big shout out to Cuz. I think he needs to maintain it for longer, as people have talked about. Like, I think other junglers have been good, but he has also been very strong. So big shout out to him. And Pawn has also put in many less stinkers than before. He's also had a good performance. We don't need to discuss Deft and Tucson. They're good. We're reviewing Griffin again, but we kind of know where Griffin is at. They had a steadier week after their kind of issues. They're a team that clearly is super good, but always the question is, can they be the number 1 in the world? You know, that's the thing, is people want to anoint them to be the replacement amazing Korean team. And we're not there yet because they have shown some struggles. They had a better performance last week, but we get to inspect the Kingzone versus Griffin series. Again, this is a series where people have criticized my analysis of game number 1 of being too focused on Griffin's lead being unassailable, when, to people's counterpoint, the gold lead never grew past 4,000, and thus the game could go into Kingzone's side. And by the time Kingzone got the lead, like, they never looked like losing, right? So was it just a straight up misjudge from me, or was there more specificity to it? Let's find out together. Like, that's the best thing about being an analyst, about making mistakes, is that you pick yourself up and you learn from it. So let's see how much of that is just me being kind of like looking into the tea leaves and seeing the wrong thing, and how much of that is potentially the game going very unexpectedly in another direction. So we'll find out. The second review of the day, getting into draft. It's one I cast, so we don't need to necessarily be as predictive about the draft. First round. So notable first round decision is leaving Jace open, and you can understand why you might consider leaving Jace open against Griffin, given that Sword hasn't performed on carries. His Riven game was an atrocity. His Ryze has been quite poor. You notice their blue side banning Ryze. That's because they don't feel strong enough to first pick it, which is a problem. There's a very good chance that Kingzone picks up Jace here, but they're also happy enough to leave it open for Griffin because of Sword. But I think Sword actually performed really well on Jace in Kesper Cup, and for the kind of bridging champions that aren't pure tanks, I feel like Jace is one that he has performed really well on. So because of that, I'm not as kind of comfortable leaving it open. And it's also worth noting that we're on patch 9.6, so if you're willing to gank the lane, you can kill Jace easier than before. He does a lot of damage, he still sieges really well, but he is in kind of more frail state in the 1v1. But with nameplates on, they leave it open. I think it's fine. First round jungle support is becoming more common. We're seeing a lot of Braum Jarvan around the world, but Tom Kench Jarvan is more a sign of Deft is usually playing hyper carries. And you look at this draft and you think, okay, they're happy enough to leave Jace open. As the draft evolves, it's very clear that Griffin have a draft that's very early on the early to mid game agency. So by the time we get to second round, you're like, definitely hyper carry somewhere. But they choose the Corki that at this point I believe hadn't won. May have had one victory, but Corki was on a huge losing streak in LCK. It's a pick that is lanes very well into some tricky mages. It's always been a pick against Lissandra. It's been a pick against LeBlanc as well. It's kind of been this, it's a very fun, it's not a triangle per se, but there's this very fun drafting quirk where Corki lanes into Lissandra LeBlanc quite well because they're burst and he can go Hex Drinker and has package sometimes to override CC, but also the Valkyrie and Flash in a short lane. So it's strong, right? But also the other fun metric there is that from there, actually Caston lanes pretty well into Corki because the Q magic damage shield and the fact that you can get through the lane with fleet footwork makes that a viable one. So we're not quite at blind pick Corki territory, but it might actually be one of the few ways we get Cassidon back in the LCK. So it's not quite a triangle, but there's this fun like Corki beats this, but then potentially Cassidon can come through. So it's something I've been thinking about. Corki with poor frontline comps, I think, are very hard to play. Chovy, for example, got super fed on Corki, you'll remember. And then they weren't able to close the game against Lissandra because they had no frontline, did Griffin. So because of that, we were very interested in the second round. And just with where you're at before the Ornn comes in, you're like, okay, they've got Corki. They're almost certainly going to draft an AD carry. Jarvan can go Cinderhulk. Tom Kench can do his best to devour and be a frontliner. Thick Boy, and then Hyper Carry is your huge expectation for this draft. Scaling draft is what you think about from Kingzone. But then they lock in the Ornn. And Ornn versus Jace has always been a matchup when Ornn power level was high. But I know I was very skeptical of Ornn in this spot, mostly because the shield is still gone, right? A lot of stuff was rebuffed, but the shield was gone. So because of that, a lot of trades in your head are very Jace favored because you don't get any value out of Unstoppable outside of, I guess, stopping the disengage on the hammer hit, which seems kind of whatever. But Ornn does definitely allow them to engage and be a frontline when those hyper carries are ready to go. So rounding out the draft, Kingzone see this and they look at the enemy team, and I think they made the exact same read that I do. Right now my webcam is in front of there because it fits during the game and I don't want to move it between champ second game. But just so you guys know, Vayne Karma entire bot lane is taken second round, and it's very much this lane denies Vayne from Kingzone's things. I think Vayne is super strong. When you have the ability to use Jarvan ultimate and Ornn ultimate, they zone so much space that then you also have to think about tumbling Vayne. You can't, right? It's just too many things. You're like, okay, I can't move, and like this Ornn horn is in the air, and like where the hell is Vayne? So I actually really like Vayne Karma, because when the enemy already has Tahm Kench and can only pick one champion for bot lane, I don't think it's possible to beat this lane 2v2 with any pick here. I think you can try Draven and get ganks, but that can be turned around. And I don't think Draven's that strong against at least Lissandra, so I think there's not really a way to pick a marksman to win this 2v2, and you deny the champion I would assume Deft would have jumped onto. So I actually really like the draft from Griffin in this game, based on kind of like a next level way. But then this is very interesting. So we're naming, okay, are we just going to see Kog'Maw? Because Deft beat Kog'Maw in lane, and then you can get 2 items and be strong on Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw was the very obvious pick with Vayne taken away. So I thought Kog'Maw for sure as his final pick here. They wait a long time. And then this happens here. And as you mentioned in my kind of 1.5 times speed with Valdez, I'm like, oh, is this Corki AD carry? Because Corki AD carry is played in the LPL, and Victor bot lane feels like the lesser son of Vlad bot lane, like not even a sometimes food, but a very rare one. I'm not a huge fan on Corki bot lane, but I think Corki trades really well against Vayne because Vayne is quite short range, so Gatling gun autos are really strong here. I don't think Corki actually... I think Corki scales with levels so much that dual lane Corki is still very much not something I'm huge on, but I looked at this and we've seen what Corki bot lane once in LPL, once I want to say in NA, but like it's not a common pick. But Victor, with where his power level is at, the fact that Rascal and Pawn have both played a lot of Victor in the past, it felt very unlikely that Victor would be bot lane in this game. But then you wonder why. You're like, okay, you pause it now and we know the comps. And we're like, okay, why Victor bot lane? And the reason, as I said on the cast, that I'll reiterate here because it's important table setting, is if you go Kog'Maw here, which is the obvious 2v2 AD carry choice here that wins the Vayne matchup, then yes, you do have nice priority in bot in terms of trades when Bioarcane Barrage is up, but when it's down, you know, Tahm Kench versus Karma, you're going to get poked out quite a lot as the Kog'Maw, so the laning phase is not going to be an ascendancy one. It's going to be a safe one for Cog, but you're going to be like, 3 to 5 CS behind. And then the mid game, Kog'Maw Tahm Kench walks up and gets super poked to doom, right? You never really find the time to get like your multiple Halo Blade auto attacks off, but without getting poked by Jace or poked by Karma or threatened by Elise or Lissandra. So like you never really warm up a Rage Blade against this Jace top comp if the lanes go as expected, which from Griffin's side is some pretty nice priority lanes in the early game around the map. So the victor is taken here to try to fight the game earlier than if it was double AD carry, and ends up being a masterstroke. I feel like for sure if they took Kog'Maw this game, it would have cost them a lot. Now there's another reason why they go the way of Victor that we'll discuss as it crops up. But they do subvert my expectation here a lot. And shout out to Kingzone for this draft. It's surprising to see Victor brought back. It makes sense based on not wanting to index too much power to the late game and not wanting to be super squishy doing so. It gives them more reliable wave clear because Victor, of course, provides wave clear. And it does mean that Tahm Kench can play a little bit differently than you might expect. So, different draft than expected. I still really like Griffin's draft here. I think, given what they had, they picked power in almost every lane and played aggressively. Like, if you give this to, say, Fun plus Phoenix in the LPL, if IG get going, like, you could see this game snowballing really hard. And it almost does as we get into game. But I definitely was a big fan of Griffin's draft, but I thought Kingzone made a change I couldn't imagine any other Korean team making and got something out of it. It wasn't a hot potato like, oh crap, Victor can't go in any lane, I guess he goes bot lane, whoops. It was I'm picking Victor for this scenario from Deft, a player who's been playing so well on hyper carries. So I think for this game, I was a big fan of both sides, which, sounds a bit like let's just give everyone, like a pat on the back, but this was a cool draft. And that's me getting super excited by Corgi Cogmore. Why is it not called Welsh Corky in English? Like, that's what I need to know. I'm scared it's a Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone thing. I think a lot of people know this reference, but the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was retitled Sorcerer's Stone in North America. There's a lot of information and misinformation as to why. Kind of the conspiracy theorist reason was that they were worried Americans wouldn't know what Sorcerer's Stone was. But so what a Philosopher's Stone was, so they went with Sorcerer's Stone. Corgi Corky is like a pretty uninspired name. It's like very literal. I would have thought Korgki would have been the name. I kind of like it's not that hard to understand why. But the Korean name is Welsh Corky, which is really, really smart. Because if people don't know this, the full name of the breed is Pembroke Welsh Corgi or Cardigan Welsh Corgi. I know this because I had a Welsh Corgi. I had a Pembroke Welsh Corgi. So Welsh Corky is actually really smart, as a name. Like, it's like obvious but not obvious, and like clever but like not that clever. Like, it's just a cute name that fits it really well. So I was very taken aback that the Koreans came up with that, and we got Corgi Corky, but enough of that aside. Shout out to anyone in the chat who has a Corgi. Big fan. So Griffin start with the late invade. They've got Jace Elise, so happy to walk up. They can check brush. They can put down vision. And so they're just happy to go for the guaranteed red buff start. Already, that means that Jace can overextend topside. We got some extra time here, chat, so we can look over this and see if there's any interesting rune choices. But this is something that Griffin will do very often whenever the few times they pick Sword into a winning matchup, they'll get vertical jungling, and so they'll be able to push out. This means that Ornn's under his turret with no shield on his W trades, which means that theoretically turret plates should go the way of the Jace. Now, it's not one-to-one. There's a lot of wave clear on the side of the Ornn, but vertical jungling topside with a late invade is a very stock standard play to get Jace ahead, which, that's what you want to do. Looking at the runes here, I'm going to have a look at the chat, see if anyone noticed anything. So approach velocity on Ornn is all about hard crowd control, hitting and missing, empowering the movement speed to reposition in team fights. Enemy team has a lot of hard crowd control as well, so very likely, like, if you think about how team fights play out with Cocoons and Lissandra flying around, the chance that you're going to be proccing approach velocity is very high. So I actually don't mind it at all on Ornn. It's a very standard rune on Tahm Kench, given that usually you want to move fast to your ally to eat them when they're being CC'd. So that one makes a lot of sense. Like, to me, this is almost like it almost feels like Ornn and Tahm Kench have captain's boots, because captain's boots were all about positioning in team fights. So this was a boot enchant years ago, by the way. Positioning in team fights, where like in team fights this would give a lot of value, out of team fights wouldn't give much. Like these approach velocities are for team fights. Otherwise, looking down the line for any interesting choices here, seeing minion dematerializer a lot more in mid lane. I wish we had mid lane lock streams to see where the minion dematerializers are being distributed. Is it just one cannon, one range minion, one melee minion? Is it 3 on the backline? I think each champion has different reasons. I know Ahri going for more into backline helps her queue clear backline minions earlier. But yeah, I see a lot of people defaulting to all 3 types. My guess is that the unique thing, which is 12% bonus damage to ranged minions, and given how much of League of Legends is about, do you hit this AP breakpoint to clear out the backline or not, exists. That, yeah, I imagine if it's not already a lot into ranged minions, I imagine that's the more interesting thing to explore, because it does push like Lux and Ahri situations where they traditionally haven't been able to clear the backline into some interesting spots. Otherwise, looking down, Gathering Storm onto Karma is a bit wonky, but there's not really too much you want to rune for there. I think otherwise it's all pretty standard. I guess it's a little bit surprising to see utility second on Vayne. Like, do you need biscuits against Tahm Kench Victor? I guess you're taking Q trades sometimes, but that was a range champion next to Victor I'd expected. I guess Biscuiteer, the stopwatch is pretty valuable here, so I guess that's the advantage there. I guess it's a small surprise, but not huge. All right, we'll get into it. So this game, on expectations, is going to be, the vertical jungling was established. Jace pushes up and gets turret plates. Jace greater than Ornn early game, especially pre-6, but Ornn can subvert numbers with buying items, so Ornn doesn't have the same ability to turn around onto Jace that Sion does without gimmicks. Like, Ornn needs like a Glacial Shroud and Ignite, and usually a gank assist. Sometimes you can get the solo kill, but with the Ignite, but you kind of need the unsealed spellbook part, whereas Sion actually can fight back really impressively in some matchups, which is important to know. Lissandra pushes in Corki early, and while Corki can farm, Lissandra roams better. Lissandra 6 is more meaningful. I would argue that Corki's level 11 is more meaningful because of just how much damage you do on those rockets as time goes on. But vertical jungling happens. Rascal pushes out too far, flashes down, and that's not a meaningless flash being down, because it's 3 minutes 40 until 3 minutes 40 until you can swap your first summoner. So you just don't have a combat summoner for the rest of this game. Cuz was already pushed to his bot side jungle, so he's just getting camps where he can. Because Vayne Karma was drafted, you'll notice that Cuz could never actually invade and steal red buff. So while it's vertical jungling, it's actually more just you get a scuttle, but you lose out on red buffs. So there's almost no teeth behind Cuz's ganks now, and you just don't want to gank for any of the lanes he has now anyway. You can't gank for Corki, he doesn't do enough damage and doesn't provide CC. Or in pre-6, too hard to gank for. Like, Cuz is in a really bad spot here. And that's why Tarzan makes a very good jungle path here. So a lot of people are going to forget how good Griffin played in this game before things didn't go their way. So let's reward them for that, and also be on the lookout for where Kingzone might be staying competitive in this game further than I saw on the cast, because I was definitely very taken aback by the comeback. But you have a ward on your red. You know that it never went there because the red is still up. So it's very easy for Tarzan to know that Krug camp now or turret dive. Like, this is a free win one way or the other. You're either getting a free turret dive here, or you're finding Cuz on his Krug camp as Elise. Just given the fact that there's no other camps he could be at because nothing else is spawned. He goes in there, DPS is out. Cuz, no harm, no foul. Important to remember here, Cuz reveals himself again by putting down the flag. He doesn't have a ward. There's no wards coming up. And he's so afraid of Sword just coming up for that turret dive a second time, right? Now, he walks up to flag, mostly with his eyes off of the screen for sure. Like he walks up to flag here. He already cast the flag, and probably about half a second earlier, if we're going to do it in real time, he sees Elise, and that's actually a really big problem because his flag is now down. So he either flashes instantly or he's taking a full combo. Now he elects to take the full combo here, again hoping that he can get Rascal or Minion Wave that he can't get to, and so he just dies. Like the time to flash, you have to think about when you flash. You watch the replay here. Rascal is saying, I could still be dive, they could still stay. And Cuz, of course, has no ward, so he has to put down the flag to check. Finds the bad news, and now you can flash towards turret, and you live. Instead, he ambles forward. You think about where the minion wave is at. This is what I want you to notice. The full minion wave is there when Cuz has the decision of, do I flash towards my turret or not? They know Lissandra's not coming, so it's going to be a 2v2 on the turret, if the worst comes to worst. But he doesn't flash towards turret, and then just kind of ambles around and dies. Like, this is really poorly played by Cuz and Rascal as a duo. They overrate their ability to put down vision when it comes to actually being able to stop the dive come in, and then they just misunderstand the scenario and straight up die. So it's really poorly played on the side of Kingzone, and that's when Kingzone have a defensive task of containment of Jace. Giving up a kill to Elise is not ideal from that when they already didn't control that, and when Cuz already had fewer jungle camps he could go to. People are saying, I think he dies if he flashes to tower. Watch how big the minion wave is when he has the chance to flash, right? Like, this is when he could flash. The minion wave, you can't see it on this screen, but the two melee minions still alive, and Jace has to clear out the backline. So it's going to take a bit of time, and then you stand behind the turret, and then, you know, your Ornn is threatening a knock-up. Like, yes, you could die there, but if you do this, you always die. And Ornn loses the minions to turret that the whole primary objective of the Jarvan throwing down a flag was there for. Like, remember again, the play is Ornn needs to know if he can take this massive minion wave. He really wants it. So Jarvan face checks to throw down the flag, then can't EQ away, and so, you know, it takes a lot of damage. So now, if you don't flash towards the turret subsequently, Ornn doesn't provide anything in the 2v2 because it's a long lane, right? He can't just predict a knock-up spot against a wall like he can next to the turret, and he's going to lose the minion wave. So whatever the kind of percentages, like, I think he's 100% to die if he goes that way, and let's say 40% to die if he goes towards the turret, maybe 35%. The fact is, he also is 100% to lose Ornn the minion wave they were fighting for. So they were always going to double lose things if he went that way. So that's why I'm not, a fan of it. We noticed it about a minute and a half later, but the cool thing that Kingzone did do with their Victor bot lane is Frostmancy. And people asked, they've already asked on this stream before, what's your opinion on BBQ Oliver's comp they ran the final game when they were running Nico and Mordekaiser in the bot lane, Graves jungle, Urgot top. I actually forget the mid laner. But and my answer to that is, I really think Frostmancy is something that teams underrate. I thought Griffin would stick around with it. They ran Ezreal with Frostmancy before the Frostmancy changes. Then Ezreal's had a lot of indirect changes around him, but you could still run Ezreal with Frostmancy. It's okay. And no other team ran any Frostmancy. I think bot lane Frostmancy was something that Kingzone really liked. The one day it was there. It's powerful. Because now Tahm Kench gets to farm up in the bot lane. So Tahm Kench is going to have a lot more gold and will have a chance to pause with the... thankfully, the observers pick the right time after the Frostmancy is over to show the gold numbers. Kingzone actually find a gold lead in the 2v2, a big gold lead in a non-interact 2v2 lane purely from Frostmancy, i.e. the quest gold from the upgraded GP10 item here, the Spell Thief's Edge, into Frostfang, is actually the reason they have a gold lead in this lane. Still, bot lane's only farming. And then you're saying, okay, Vayne Karma are farming with a bit of a CS lead. That's fine. And you'd be right. That's Vayne Karma, right? This could be really powerful as the game goes on. Break-even point for Griffin is 2 items. The earlier Vayne has 2 items, the bigger chance they can just win team fights before the enemy has Ornn Jarvan Tahm Kench frontline and 3-item Corki. Basically, Corki not being able to hit IE any point before that should be pretty big advantage in both a grouping and a spread out to the side of Griffin. So Tarzan is doing his thing, showing a lot of coverage over the top side. You want to get down turret plates. You want to inject as much gold as possible if you're the side of Griffin. Importantly, no turret plates yet. So in spite of the Jarvan dying, they haven't been able to actually make a bigger lead from that. If it's a Scion, you get a couple of turret plates because it's Orin and he can get power in lane. The windows to actually have your jungler there in terms of like have like a coverage situation, a vision advantage, and the enemy low enough health to teleport back against Orin is so hard that Roscoe actually keeps the turret up, and it's why I think we will definitely see more Orin as the tournament progresses. For sure, it seems like Orin will be the big riser in terms of picks coming into next week. Pretty good moment. Cuz actually gets his team collapsing and no one dies there. Spotted out in the Ocean Drake, but no ability to translate that into a kill. That's a small moment that Griffin feel like they didn't get the big lead they did last time. They actually lost the only summoners of that. Lens had to use Flash and Heal to make it happen. Probably means that Vayne won't be able to walk up as much. But yeah, I mean, again, you pause at this moment and you're like 22 CS lead in bot lane. Now, of course, on further reflection, it's Frostmancy, so there's a reason that CS lead is. But it's Vayne going even, at minimum, right? In the mid lane, Lissandra pushing in the lane, and a nice CS lead top. 18 CS is 3 minion waves, so this early game has gone really well for Griffin. Only thing that you see in the paused game now is that there's not a lot of... like Elise hasn't been able to take a lot of jungle camps. Kind of a reality of her as a jungler is clear speed on AoE camps is pretty poor. But we're just playing it out here. Again, the game has not been won or lost at this point. Top side's doing well. Griffin still feel like they have to find a way to actually take over this game. It isn't now. This is a very nice thing to show. So we see that Frostmancy so far has led to a 600 gold lead on Tahm Kench over Karma. And this is a Karma who's against Victor and Tahm Kench. So we'll definitely be able to cash in her quest pretty fast. And a 100 gold lead for Victor over Vayne, despite the fact that he's not CSing recently. So you're seeing that Frostmancy is now literally directly attributable for a 700 gold lead. Nice thing to know. Cool, huh? Deft actually gets his GP10 cash in at 10:37. For reference, let's find out when he actually bought the item. So already back into lane at 4:58. He actually finishes Frostfang around 4:30 and cashes it in by 10:37. So that's very interesting to know. So it takes about 6 minutes to get his GP10 cashed in. Because he gets just a straight Frostfang, Karma actually got a later back timing. So you'll notice that despite there being such a big lead in when the first gold item was done, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be Victor getting the entire quest completed earlier. So I think that kind of justifies some of the opinions of teams about... This is an important play, but a lot of teams believed you didn't have to get Spell Thief's first item. You started with Corrupting Pot, then you bought entire Frostfang, and we can see that it takes about 6 minutes for Frostfang to go from 0 gold to 500 gold. But starting Spell Thieves and poking against a Tahm Kench doesn't get you gold faster than a 4-minute lead. So that's really interesting to know about that. Now, this is the first kind of big moment in the game. Victor's teleporting to bot. Cuz is seen going topside, so you can kind of plug and play that Cork will be around there as well. Corki puts down a ward, and you'll notice this play looks super assertive. Like, this was the first big play in the game. And we come back to how it starts. We slow it down a bit. What happens here? We remember that Kingzone did not pick for topside control. Griffin have Jace into Ornn. They have Elise into Jarvan. Elise got an early kill. Chovy also, you'll notice, is on the push and roam champ. And that's something that Corki can't do enough standing damage to make up for how much burst and control Lissandra has in the early game. So you can largely ignore Corki and his only damage 10 minutes in, the way you can't at 25 minutes, right? So Tarzan comes in, he leads in, and Chovy sees Jarvan but doesn't give any mundos about Jarvan because he can just burst down Corki. It's Cinderhulk Jarvan, which they needed to go as another frontliner against this team. So he does no damage, he's taken down. We saw Hylissang be the biggest understander of this, doing way more than Yankos' Cinderhulk Jarvan could ever deal with as the Rakan last time out. So ignoring Cinderhulk Jarvan, thumbs up. Do it in your solo games, no problem. From here, though, it goes from bad to worse. So it's a good assertive roam coming through. Then you watch here, Rascal, you'll notice, has switched over to Cleanse Ignite for laning phase. And he has that because he can just sit in lane, sit under turret, and with Cleanse Ignite, he can never be turret dived. He can cleanse the Cocoon coming through from Elise, and his ult plus Ignite means he can't be turret dive. However, for roaming, it doesn't provide him anything. So shout out to Sword for knocking him out of the air. Call the Forge God goes down, and around the same scene of the crime where they found their lead in the jungle matchup, they double down in here. Like, they get so much topside here. And that's your worry is, as a Kingzone fan, is that Viper is competitive in gold at worst. His turret is not lost any turret plates, and all the plays topside where the jungle was the entire game have gone well. Finally, they start getting those turret plates. There's 2 in the top side. Like, this is where things are really, really strong. You also get the Rift Herald during the turret plates phase. Like, you can't really play out Griffin's draft any better than they have so far. Whereas Kingzone have made a lot of mistakes. Like, Pawn didn't need to walk up here, and then Griffin just outplayed them in the 2v2. Like, this feels like poor understanding of how strong and or weak Corki Jarvan are as a 2v2 at 10 minutes. They're very weak. And then nice play from Sword, like a little micro moment, knocking the Ornn out of the air, is a really big lead. Like, this seems like the sort of lead that, again, what does this gold lead mean at 30 minutes? Nothing. It's 1.8k. But what does it mean before Kingzone have teamfight items? Way more than the gold indicates. Like, this is a 4k gold lead, masked as a 2k gold lead because of where we are in the game, and because Griffin have champions that can turret dive, Griffin have champions that can do things. Like, they're very, very strong at this present point in the game for sure. Yeah, definitely some big item completions for Griffin topside. At least has all the gold, which, not ideal. So we just fast forward. They once again take over red side jungle, which has been where everything poor happened for Kingzone. You notice this play. They take down the turret plate, and then they go for the charge. It's what you always want to do, because remember, the Rift Herald charge does true damage, so you definitely want to negate you want to get it to 2 plates, then kill it where possible, because then you don't have to worry about the extra armor and MR that turrets get if you have allies near it. That means this Jace has just so much gold advantage over top. Jace is super duper strong at this point. They still control top side. Kingzone smartly playing less far around, but, what can you do? If you can't farm under turret as Rascal, you have nowhere to go. There's no TP bot lane play available, so easy to turret dive, using Tarzan's gold lead to have extra burst damage. Gold lead 3.1k at this point, but again, Kingzone completely control 3/4 of the map, and at worst, they completely control enemy red side and top side in general. Now, it's 5 minutes till Baron spawns, so it's hard for them to get anything else in that area. They're going to have to re-invade another part of the map in order to actually have relevant map control. But they TP in, they don't even lose the mid lane turret. Really good game state for Griffin. Now, the game's not over from Kingzone, and we really like Kingzone going to late, is what we have to remember. But Griffin can roll mid lane. Nothing that Corki can do. He might have a Trinity Force, but so much turret damage. I was very sure that he would die there, mainly because if you notice, Kingzone's members just didn't want to flash. Roscoe had flash. Deft had flash. Tucson had flash. They just wanted to get the kill. It took them a long time to do so. But they lost mid lane turret. TP bot lane play happens. Now, it's a time when bot lane can't be punished because they're not going to return to the inner turret. But they lose mid lane inner as well. They only get one kill. It's on to Deft. And they lose the outer bot lane turret. So it's still overall a kind of, at worst even, I would say tempo up play. Because now, the moment Baron spawns, Griffin completely own Baron. You will not see many teams at 16 minutes be in more of a position to take a Baron. Reason why I say that is, they've always controlled top red side jungle. You take down the inner turrets in top lane and the minions push up, and thus you have more information about who's coming. So that's definitely the minion wave closest to the Baron, so it gives you Baron vision. They also have inner mid lane turret vision. So their ability to create a triangle that's basically the enemy red side jungle and say, we own this, is very high, especially for 16 minutes. And so at 20 minutes, if they can maintain that, you put down a control ward, you have so many indirect and direct ways to control the Baron pit. Like, this is very much the we own Baron turret setup they have. Now, obviously, immediately it provides nothing because there ain't no 16-minute Barons. But it's another thing that plays into the win condition of Griffin because Baron is going to be very useful in closing this game. Enemy team's wave clear against Baron is ultra poor. Corki Victor can't actually do much damage to Baron buff minions. So given that, you're like, okay, once again, you're happy with Griffin is, but the gold lead again is nothing to write home about. It's now at 3,500 gold, and I believe this ends up being the biggest discrepancy. So it could just be that Griffin did so much early and then weren't able to find further objectives or weren't actually impacting the map. So let's all, as a team, watch together and understand how this comeback happens. Is it just PapaSmithy screwed up and Kingzone had them where they want them? Is it the soul of that, or is it the opposite? We're going to learn together because Griffin have taken so many objectives that, like, only outer bot lane turret, Mountain Drake, inner bot lane turret exist. Like, everything else is dead. You know, inhibitors are up, but no one's cracking those just yet. So now Sword goes top lane. This doesn't really do anything because he's not going to split push an inhibitor. So I don't think that's great lane assignment. It does mean minion waves continue to push, but we already talked about how if this was 20 minutes, you like it. 17 minutes, not so much. And they give away a free mountain. So let's look at back timings here. So the back timings are now. They're coming back from back 16-15. So the back timings have happened. The decision is made to send Jace topside and for Vayne to pick up a minion wave. Now, their items are in a really good spot. Like, for sure in the jungle, they have a huge item lead, right? Like, at the burst duo on the jungler. Lissandra and Elise will kill one person. Lissandra, Jace. Like, any two of Jace, Lissandra, Elise kill people. But they're not using them together, so they're not getting any map control around Mountain Drake, which should have been a very real objective. Now, Karma was on a back timing. Maybe they really wanted the Athenes, but everything should be Griffin's. Like, this is literally Griffin get a 90% discount at the BMW store, and Kingzone have to play over ticket price for anything because the early spike champions and the map control they have can so easily be wielded. So the moment that Sword goes top lane, that discount gets way smaller, and it actually invites Kingzone to start up a Mountain Drake that should never really be possible. So it's surprising to see Griffin make this play of, you know, waiting for an item buy on the support, putting support mid with the AD carry. Like, yes, Mountain Drake from behind is a good point that LS always brings up, is that Mountain Drake from behind doesn't really do anything because you're not hitting turrets, you're not hitting Baron, you're not hitting Drake. But it does a lot for Griffin on a squishy lineup that wants to be able to kill Baron fast. So if the comms are, all right, we got there late, never mind, it's only Mountain Drake, I don't mind it. But it feels more like an oversight from how they play it. And Griffin continue to camp top side. So again, plays that play into early Baron is what they're talking about. Cuz has to be so scared. So instantly vision clearing. So 16 minutes, we were like, damn, they can set up a Baron well. At 18 minutes, they're still only thinking about Baron, really. They got Chovy bot lane with no TP, but has Aftershock, so they just want to take an outer turret here where possible. Gold lead. Kind of amazing gold lead on the Victor, right? Frostmancy. This is why you see people do it. The kill is 300 what? 300, 400 gold? I don't think there was any shutdowns, but let's call it 300 gold. The problem was before with Frostmancy, I believe before this patch, I think this is the patch where they changed it, but before 9.6, 9.5 Frostmancy was stronger because the gold generation items weren't counted, so you actually were getting some sick gold from the quest that made you have more gold than the enemy, and the enemy AD carry, because the GP10 item wasn't counted, was counted as having a CS bounty. So the enemy was getting a bounty while you were making more gold. I believe this is the patch where that was removed. So this is just straight up Frostmancy giving 700-800 gold. Support also has a 600 gold lead, which is very hard to do in Tahm Kench versus Karma. Not something to be overlooked. So here's the map state that makes the play. Griffin are just going to accept top red side control, and then Kingzone make the rotation play. They're not spotted doing so, and they chase down the kill. They invest a lot to get this kill. Tahm Kench flashes, 2 flashes, 3 flashes to make the kill, right? While they still lose top and mid harder. So that's why I make the point that I think people took the most umbrage with right now. This is the turning point in the game where I think a lot of people will criticize is I look at that play where they 3 flash, 3 ult just to kill Chovy, who didn't have teleport, right? So it's not like they took down a teleport. And I thought, this is so desperate, right? This is just a reset mental. Now, here's the counterpoint that you should raise is Kingzone weren't giving anything up doing that in terms of structures. They had already lost their inner and outer turrets. Good point. That is a very valid point. If Kingzone had spent all of their time doing other things, they couldn't have got anything else. Also a possible point here, because remember that Baron doesn't spawn for a minute and a half. So Kingzone don't need to be fighting for Baron vision right now because they don't have any turrets and there is no Baron. So slamming everyone down bot lane and getting a kill in vacuum is a good thing. However, is using the 3 summoners to do so with 5-minute cooldowns a good thing? I would argue that like 1+2+3, where it's we rotated everyone bot lane and 3 ults in order to get 1 kill, and then aren't able to fight for the Baron vision around red side jungle as 20 minutes comes on. After we've seen Griffin like really clearly prioritizing that, just like in our first review of the night where we talked about how FlyQuest gave up competing for a Baron and an Elder because they had the later reset. You still have to fully reset after getting the kill down bot lane. They don't even get the turret from it either, I don't believe. And that means you're going to be late to the Baron vision contest. So that's the long counterpoint on both sides. But it's very good because this is a very important learning exercise for everyone, including myself, because this game went a surprising way for me especially. So they push through the bot lane here. These are going to be freebies. Can't get the turret. Get the push in. And then have to reset. So what does Griffin do from here? Because they lost their, the mid laner, but does it matter? Yes and no. They chase down, they get the kill. The map state doesn't change, but now Griffin back. They full reset with control wards aplenty. They're coming back with 7 control wards, and they already control the river area. Whereas Kingzone are desperate to just get some control wards on the red side jungle. But smart by Kingzone. You'll notice Roscoe goes back. He has to actually shop to do this, but he sells his Biscuit for 2 control wards, and Cuz gets 2 control wards. So they're clearly aware of the same thing. I feel like the vision backs in LCK are one of the things that are a little bit better than other regions. Is much less time for there to be exhaustion of vision than there can be in other regions. But playing forward from there. The question now is also, okay, PapaSmithy, you said that Kingzone outscale. When can they start 5v5ing? I think minimum time is 2-item Corki. But 3-item Corki is what you really need. Rapid Fire Cannon's not done. He's what, 1100 gold away from it if he hasn't shopped in a while. Might have it soon. Baron is now spawned. And Kingzone do have good defensive vision there. And it's worth noting that Griffin, since that point, like, let's just watch this. Let's do a tale of the minimap. We talked about how they were looking over red side jungle, and thus the bot lane kill shouldn't factor too much, but watch the champions in the minimap and see what they're up to. Elise is running into her own jungle, Jace is picking up a minion wave, Vayne and Karma are getting pushed in, Lissandra is being super safe, not really going towards any objectives. Kingzone are not doing anything with their lead right now. They are just kind of happy footing. Griffin are just happy footing because they took so many easy objectives that the next objective kind of has to be Baron. It's like the easiest objective of the remaining ones. Outside of just like trying to send 5 members bot lane to take bot lane turret, but I don't think getting bot lane turret is anything other than a cash turret for them. It's not ideal. It does mean that Rascal can play that side lane a bit easier, but given it's a no TP mid laner, there's no huge incentive to take bot lane turret apart from more gold. So the only way to actually move the game forward is Baron. And as we're jumping forward, we'll notice Griffin have not really made a visit towards Baron at all. Since then, they've lost Baron vision. They do take the bot lane turret. We talked about how it's a cash turret. Wit's End was pointed out by the observer here. Allows him to fight a little bit longer in team fights. Otherwise, if you ever tumble forward, you're so afraid of being double lifted, I guess is the way to talk about it, but deleted by a Victor or a Corki burst. Now, in order to get Baron vision, they need the buddy system, and right now they're not getting it. Karma solo blast plants down, and holy crap, there's a lot of wards here from Kingzone. Look at how much vision there is. There's 4 sight wards, a control ward at the spotting brush, and a forward control ward. Like, Kingzone actually have awesome vision they've put down around the Baron defensively, while Griffin kind of just did not much. Like, you could argue they put down too many wards, but I think given the way the game went of Griffin were like so obviously preparing for Baron at 18 and 16 and 17 minutes, maybe that's the right amount of wards to make sure there's just no chance that Griffin can take an easy Baron. So shout out to Kingzone vision control here. It actually is super solid, and gold lead has actually narrowed. It's about 300 gold less. Finally, they find a bit of a chance for Chovy to clear out some vision. Now, some of the vision at this point has elapsed. Some of it's been cleared out. And this ends up being the big team fight in the game. Things to remember here. 3,000 gold lead for Griffin with an earlier power spike. Items here are important. Rapid Fire Cannon's done, so Corki's not a afterthought, but certainly isn't fully team fight ready. Lichbane done, so a bit of burst. However, item lead very clearly and obviously on the side of Griffin for this. The best part is the play-by-play here. See, an IE, and maybe they'll be able to fight back, and then Valdes says. Griffin are a very intelligent team. Very important timing on this one. So this is over an Ocean Drake, right? It's a pretty low value Drake for the side of Griffin. You know, it's third spawn Ocean. And then we watch this play out. So this is really, really significant moment in the game. A lot of the work done by Kingzone was to repel Baron and not make this game about a Baron. They were very afraid of it becoming about a Baron with the fact they had inner turrets down. It's not about a Baron, so already you like that as Kingzone. Kingzone are a team that want to fight with their front line in front and their damage dealers behind. That's not a revolutionary concept, it's front to back. Corki wants to, you know, be a ranged AD carry, and Def just wants to poke down people that walk up. And they have so much zone control with Cinderhulk, Jarvan, and Ornn. Like, if you think about how thick the Ornhorn is, the core of the Forge Guard, but also the Cataclysm range, those are areas where you can't tumble, where Jace can't get 500 range autos. So clogging up a choke is something Kingzone do really, really well. And from behind there, you like Pawn and Def doing damage. So Cuz makes it front to back. He's not threatening a backline access where he's at. And Sword rocks up poking, which, okay, so far is fine. Kingzone smartly continue to kite back and watch Chovy and his angle to come in. Now, remember something here. Griffin, with all their lead, has no forward vision anymore. The game state has changed since they monopolized the map before. They have no forward vision, and Chovy goes in thinking he's going to get deft, because right now he doesn't know where Pawn is. He goes into the back line, and then with this formation, Chovy has no threat. Tahm Kench Devourer is still up, so he can't do anything. Rascal goes into stasis. Remember, this is a over half health Rascal in stasis, mostly because he's trying to find a better time to turn. Like, he is definitely getting free auto by multiple people, but the rest of his team walks up, Redemption walks up, and they get to turn. And here's the problem that happens. From the stasis is disengaged, Rascal flashes. You can give this up and you get a free Drake. The Drake is free here for Griffin, and the fight doesn't need to happen. Instead, as we watch, Ornhorn is summoned, Sword jumps into the back in a way that no one can follow up on, presently or after. This is a terrible time to go into the backline, because it's on to Ornn. He doesn't have burst on Ornn, and 280 carries, or in this case, a Corki and a bot lane Victor, can turn on him instantly. That's 5v4 already. Griffin don't have a front line. That's not what they drafted for. It wasn't one of their win conditions. 5v5 team fighting is not what you pick Jace, Elise, Lissandra, Vayne, and Karma for. Like, you're picking this for skirmishing and for tempo plays, which they've done so well for the first 18 minutes of the game, but they've actually slipped off the tempo a bit, as we've been noting, in the following 4 minutes. And now suddenly, they can just turn and hit the closest target. Chovy's flash is 10 seconds away from cooldown. Doesn't matter if his Aftershock block is up. Viper has items. Tarzan has a lot of items. He has the most of the gold lead, and Karma can give them shields to move forward aggressively. It doesn't matter. They get nothing out of the backline here purely because Sword just YOLO'd into backline like he was Urgot trying to buffer someone. That's a really, really big mistake. And this is kind of my counterpoint to it being foreseeable, the turn here. Yes, the champions on Kingzone reach a point where if they can make it about 5v5s Griffin have to take, Kingzone's comp is way better. Problem is, this happens after Drake is already dead into Ornn, Jarvan, Tahm Kench, and with Deft and Pawn being able to kite away. It's Jace opening up on Ornn next to a Tahm Kench and nowhere near carries. Like, you already got the objective here. For sure, CV Max reviews this and says, what are you fighting for? They're not fighting for anything. The Ornn ult's in a great spot, but it's in a choke that favors him. Like, it's super unlikely you make a play like that as Griffin. Like, it's really, really poor play. And then, because of the timer, it's 23 minutes. Griffin couldn't get easy objectives at 18 minutes because there was no Baron. They just rushed the Baron. Here's the second point I want to raise. The Baron plays, it goes to the side of Kingzone, they get out, right? Only Rascal dies. Remember how this all happened. A fight that didn't need to happen 30 seconds earlier happens and they get 2 kills. Then, because it's after 23 minutes, compared to the mistakes that Kingzone were making at 6 minutes, 8 minutes, Baron's on the map, Kingzone make a second smart call that seems incredibly YOLO in hindsight, but is actually correct. Given where the map state has been, where they don't have inner turrets, they run straight at Baron. They see Tarzan when the Baron is at 6,000 health, and they still finish the Baron. Remember this. They finish the Baron in a 50-50. They don't have a smite lead. They actually don't have 2 smites either. Like, this is super YOLO Baron. Rascal teleports in. He doesn't have Unsealed Spellbook Smite. Tucson doesn't have Unsealed Spellbook Smite. They rush down the Baron at 23 minutes. And it's a 50-50. Yep, it's a true 50-50. The Baron falls to 130 health before Cuz is able to pick it up. This is a really assertive Baron. And the point that I can't say in a cast, because there's no pausing or rewinding, I don't have control of the observer, is consider the 2 things that happened. Kingzone give up control on an objective that Griffin can take for free without the 5v5. The only way Griffin can lose the game is 5v5s. And then Griffin opt into 2 5v5s that they couldn't disengage and die. And then Kingzone take the 50-50 Baron while Lysandra is still dead and before Jace can get there. The Baron falls to 130 before Jarvan gets it. Those 2 things are really unlikely. A poor teamfight engage from Griffin where they had no payoff if they got the teamfight win, into the most assertive Baron can call from Kingzone when they were strong for a real brief window. They hadn't even fully disengaged and shopped after that. Okay, only a couple people got to shop. They just rolled to Baron and took it. And that's an awesome shot call from Kingzone. An unlikely assertive shot call, similar to the great ones that FlyQuest were making in terms of their engages in our first review of the day. So this is the sort of turnaround that happens once out of every 30 games with a really switched on team absolutely taking advantage of a massive mistake from the team in the lead. That's a huge throw overall, but it required Griffin giving 2 kills over after they got a free objective and then not getting the 50-50 Baron. If the 50-50 Baron goes the way of Griffin, I think they still win this game because IE was still really far away from Corki. But let's go glass half full and say Kingzone picked up the ball that was handed to them by Griffin's poor backline fight with Sword going in and suiciding, and then ran with it with the Baron. So credit to Kingzone for a smart shot call on a roster that's got, of course, some mixed players when it comes to where they're at in terms of shot calling. Oh, shout out to Sideshow for raiding with a party of 209. Thank you very much there. Imagine some of your viewers are Overwatch people, but very nice to have you over here. VOD review brethren, I guess. But back to the VOD review. Now Baron's on Kingzone. And we already mentioned that Kingzone with Baron, Kingzone against Baron. And again, that's what we're going to focus on. They lost 2 turrets top, 2 turrets mid. Top side was losing super hard. You get the Baron, and then Victor Laser does nothing to the minions, and Corki, mostly magic damage, does nothing to the minions. The Baron just basically ends this game, and even though it's Vayne Lysandra, not the most ideal siege duo if we're playing 2 lanes, Jace, of course, as we know, has so much flat damage, he just bazookas the turrets down, and you can work it out in multiple lanes. But Kingzone, who had no map control, especially around Baron, got the Baron from their YOLO Baron, and suddenly, now they're Corki with Baron. Now they're Victor poking and buying some space. Now they can Ornhorn aggressively and zone away. This is very much just old AP Gragas ult of throwing out an ultimate just so you get a turret when the minion wave pushes up. It's outrageous. They get a turret this far out of the play. With how far behind they were, but this game is just turned in an instant. And Yeah, could not have foreseen that. That's why I call it such a big throw, because of if you sit there before that fight starts around Ocean Drake, again, remember it's stupid Ocean Drake, right? Open Drake, as LS would call it. And you tell me how many times out of the 100 ways this could go do Griffin give up Baron and multiple kills? I would have said 1, 2, almost 0. But they like lost exactly the maximum around a Drake they didn't even care of. And only now is the gold lead there. You know, Griffin's ahead in kills, but none of that matters. It was such an unlikely order of events that happened to get the game into this state. And suddenly, Kingzone are actually plain sailing. They got the first Baron. No longer can Griffin play around Baron. Griffin face check way worse. This Baron changed so much about the game. And now we'll probably never see a game state where Griffin have map control. Elise may be strong, but she can't contest vision. The river controls over the side of Kingzone. And now Griffin, who happy-footed from 18 minutes onwards, are now in a spot where they'll be staring down the inevitable barrel of Corki. Corki got IE with this game at an even to better state for the side of Kingzone. So good luck with that one. It's almost impossible to play against that particular play. Kingzone can push up. Remember, they have more tanks, so they can face check and put down aggressive vision, which is impossible for Griffin to do, because if Griffin tried to do that, they just die to random bursts, so they can't put down vision. So Griffin's vision line is no vision. Look at the vision here. It's all red wards. There's no blue wards anywhere near the pit. So the second Baron spawns. The first one was to smash and grab. Griffin have to be so slow to walk up. They have to come through a path like this. Guess what? Takes forever for them to get in there. So Kingzone, Griffin have to use so many tools here to try to get anything representing an even trade, but they can't do damage to pawn and deft at the same time. So you watch the play. One person dies. It's Chovy. Has to use his whole health bar and flash to open up space. They use every single tool they have to try to turn it, and that stops the Baron the first time. Most they could do. And then Kingzone just say, it's 5v4. Now this play here seems very boneheaded, right? Because they're just running at Baron to do it again. The reason you can do this is that when we talk about Baron comps, I always make sure to discuss it. There are multiple different variables to discuss. There is, how fast do you kill the Baron? Do you have any special ways to secure the Baron? And how good is your turn from Baron? Now, we're going to mostly talk about number 3, which is the turn from Baron. The turn from Baron from Kingzone is God tier. And that's actually a 2-point discussion. The first thing is you want pick CC and specifically AoE CC on the turn in order to catch someone who walks up. Well, they have Ornn, who is the best at doing that. Jarvan can do it as well, even without his ultimate. And they have Abyssal Voyage situationally to turn. So that's already really good turn. But it's actually a second variable of, can you tank the Baron long enough to wait for the right turn? And they've got Ornn in the pit. So yes, they can actually tank the Baron almost infinitely. He is ultra tank. They have Cinderhulk Jarvan. He is very able to tank the Baron. Tahm Kench can sort of tank the Baron. And with Frostmancy, it's Tahm Kench with at least some more Ruby Crystals, so he can tank the Baron a bit longer. You compare on the left side of the screen to Griffin. If they are trying to turn off the Baron, they have no tank stats at all. Like Banshee Veil gets popped on Elise, and everyone else is squishy. So their Baron turn in terms of CC is okay, because Lissandra can do a lot of cool stuff over walls, but not as good as Kingzone in terms of the CC, and way worse in terms of the ability to tank it up. So actually, if you have both those things and can turn the best, make the game about Baron, because enough times of rounds of Ornn Horns, you'll get catches, and it's a 5v4, so you're already incentivized to make it about the Baron. So they jump onto Baron, they take it down, it's 5v4, so they make it around Baron, and then from there it's just Corki auto attacks, right? Lands dies instantly. This is the angriest Corgi of all time. Yeah, they just get ultra slammed, right? No frontline here. Baron buff minions pushes in. So this is a huge turnaround. And if you're watching it, the time between Kingzone and Griffin being ahead is huge. Griffin is super ahead till 22 minutes into the game, and then the game is over at 31. And so I think it's very easy for someone to say, well, they had the outscale comp, and they got the Baron, so they won the game. And you're 100% correct on those very clean discussions. And I think if you just watch the game once through and, don't think about it too critically, it feels like me saying that the game was basically over at 16 minutes and then it ends the other way not that long afterwards is a mistake. And you're right, it is a mistake. But the soul of the comment is, I'm making my, fortune telling, I guess we call it. I'm reading the tea leaves. I'm trying to understand the analytical position the game is in. And the game is in a point where Griffin have inner turret top, inner turret mid, can take objectives with just damage because they don't have crowd control. They didn't pick for a 5v5, so why would they be 5v5ing? They're the first place team in the league and have been very, very smart. And I can't foresee them first kind of making some mess ups around 18 to 22 minutes. They didn't actually improve their map state, whereas credit to Kingzone. Did some really good job warding around Baron after 20 minutes. I didn't see that coming. But from there, suicide into a team fight and lose 2, then lose out on a 50-50 Baron, and then never find a way to get map control again. Like, the amount that Kingzone leveraged from Sword's mistake going into the backline, a mistake that didn't need to happen, was insane. Like, the amount of futures, like the parallel universes where Kingzone got map control and could go Baron into Baron, were so few. Like, the amount of futures where Kingzone controlled this pace of the game from 23 to 30 minutes was so small. Like, it almost never happens with how far behind they were in terms of tempo. And I know tempo is this difficult to understand word, but again, just think about how this game plays out if they don't get the fight into Baron. Like, you could say, all right, Papa, but like, just wait for IE, just wait. But they don't control when things happen. They can't wait. They're basically needing to go to the toilet right now. And they just need to go to the toilet right now. They can't hold it any longer. Like, that's the issue, is that the enemy team holds all the cards. Like, Kingzone have all the map control. They have all the choices over everything that happens. Griffin has all the control over everything that happens. And Kingzone only can do things when Griffin decides it's okay. But then Griffin throw over the keys, and just give Kingzone complete control over the mid game, and then there's no way back in. And yes, if you tell me the game's even at 30 minutes, who wins? We said it already very clearly. It's Kingzone. 3-item Corki, or an ultimate, Jarvan, Cinderhulk. Like, you win this game for sure. But Griffin did everything right about what they had and didn't have to care about what the enemy had until they made a huge throw. So then to me, this is a really big throw of a game. I think my biggest flaw on the cast is I didn't notice how good the vision play was around the Baron, around 19 to 22 minutes. That was really good warding from Kingzone to stop the Baron ever being start the Baron and turn and kill someone. I think Kingzone deserve a lot more credit in that area. I think, I was trying to have fun with the Chovy chase kill, and I didn't need to say that it was like preparing for the next game, but in the mindset of, well, almost every scenario where Kingzone lose this game, then I think it's understandable, but you also have to eat, the egg on your face or the humble pie there. So big shout out to Kingzone for their ability to turn this game. I think they had to have the ball thrown to them, in my opinion, because I couldn't see Griffin just grinding it out for 10 more minutes and doing nothing. But I think the timer just got just completely skewed. Like, this game almost feels like an Infinity Edge just picked up out of nowhere for Corki because of the big mistake from Griffin. So it's kind of my take on it. I think Kingzone backed this up with an amazing second game and showed that this was no fluke. So I'm really happy that Kingzone in game number 2 were able to just straight up win the game, and there was no question marks over their play there. I think they slammed down Griffin in a big way. I really wonder what this game means for Griffin, because they are, they're they're limping to the finish. And that either means something or it doesn't, given that their spot was already assured when this game happened. But enjoyed this VOD. I think it was a really fun one. Overall, I really liked the chance to discuss it with everyone because it's a learning for all of us, because it was one that went very against my expectations. But the end result is comfortably closed out by Kingzone, as they should, with the Infinity Edge. And that means that we are done with our Kingzone DragonX versus Griffin VOD review. We'll be holding on to... We'll be done with LCK for now. Short break, play a couple of ads, and then we're moving on to the LPL. It's EDG versus IG. One of the last games of the season, one of the most mouth-watering ones. One I haven't watched, so I'm very excited to watch EDG versus IG, and I hope you guys all join me in a few minutes. We won't be VOD reviewing game number 2 of this series, and that was very straightforward and doesn't need a VOD review, but I think it's cool to learn this one, and yeah, EDG IG, 2 legends of Chinese League of Legends, so